So I want to acknowledge what we know, which is that this museum and much of the state is sited upon Quapaw, Caddo, and Wajaje Osage ancestral and treaty territory. It's my intention as curator of Indigenous art to hold space within the museum for important topics, histories, stories, and events such as this. And you honor us with your presence. I know folks have made the journey, some by flight, some have driven many hours to join us, and we are so grateful that you made time out of your life to come and listen to this discourse. So I'm going to introduce the show. American Sunrise is really about asking the question, how do our connections to art and place reshape what we know about America? This exhibition is filled with works from over 30 artists spanning over 150 years into our history, and the title, American Sunrise, was inspired by the 2019 novel by Joy Harjo, the 23rd Poet Laureate of the United States. Harjo's poetry opens up a dialogue with American history through the lens of Indigenous nations' relationships to the land through past, present, and future timelines. As you can see, the exhibit highlights a diverse range of medium and innovative and technically mastered art forms, including basketry, beadwork, paintings, photography, and pottery. This exhibition prioritizes Indigenous voices and perspectives, and this show foregrounds artist-led narratives with labels authored by guest writers. So if you have a chance after this talk, please take time to slowly go throughout the exhibit to read and see all of the beautiful stories. The exhibition is guided by 3 themes: Indigenous Futurisms, which is an artistic movement which envisions alternative futures where Indigenous people reclaim agency, sovereignty, and authority over Indigenous art and culture, as well as kinship, thinking about the ways that artists relate to not just each other as networks of makers, but also kinship to the material world or the natural world. And place. Many artists reference this sense of place, both metaphorically and physically, using the land or the place that we now know as the United States as a collaborator in art. I'm going to turn the time over to our incredible panelists. We are joined by artists whose work is in the show, including our guest, Lilly Van, who is the granddaughter of Jane Austen, who has 3 works in the exhibition. So I'll let you introduce yourselves.
My name is Teri Greeves. I'm Kiowa like Jordan. I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I'm a beadworker.
Kwa Kumakiha Bahanati. Hello, my name is Jeri Redcorn, and Bahanati is the Caddo word for river woman. And it's interesting because my mother was Potawatomi and my father was Caddo, and my Potawatomi name is Zibiqua, and that means creek woman or river woman. So, welcome.
Hi, my name is Kelly Church. I'm from the Mechimbashamis Band, and I'm a black ash basket weaver.
All right, I'm Lilly Van. I'm sitting in for my grandmother, Jane Austen. She's a Cherokee Nation national treasure for pottery.
OCO, my name is Ashley Holland. I'm the curator and director of curatorial initiatives with Art Bridges, and I'm a co-curator with Jordan for this show. And I thought we would start with Kelly for the panel. Kelly, that basket is huge. Can you talk about the size, what went into making it, the background on it? I mean, this is a long sort of moment that you have gotten to making baskets of this size.
So I come from a basket weaving family. This is the largest basket I have ever created to date. In Michigan, we have a bug that started coming through, an invasive pest from China called the emerald ash borer. It has steadily been killing the black ash trees we weave baskets from for decades. So we are at the end of our trees in Michigan, possibly in the next few years. This year when I went to harvest to create this basket, the trees were very devastated. We had a warm winter. It makes a difference. So this basket is called Sustaining Traditions, Basket of Resilience. While we are losing our trees, we are also collecting seeds for future generations. So as we lose something, we always need to look ahead to how we can sustain it, revitalize it, but continue it. So I like to look at my work as something that's from the past, talking about something that's happening today in the present, and in the future will become history. Creating this basket was a feat. You know, I start everything from my head, I drew it on paper, and then it becomes the product. So I had to really think a lot, think about how it could set, how it could not fall over. As I wove it, it took 2 logs to weave this basket. And when I say 2 logs, I weave from the black ash tree, which means it's a tree that grows about 20, 40 feet without branches. We harvest it in 2 logs, which this is the largest log we've ever used. It was 11 foot long. Then we have to debark it end to end, and then we pound on it with the backside of a very old axe. As hard as you're chopping wood, and the backside of the axe is about 1 inch long, so we're overlapping 1/2 inch all the way down that log. It releases the fibers in between the growth rings. Each growth ring pops up and releases. So it's 2 inches wide, it'll be 11 foot long. And then I take them, put them in a thing I call a splitter. It looks like a big clothespin. I put it inside there, I score the wood in half, and then I peel it from end to end, like a banana kinda. On the inside of this growth ring, it's silky, it's smooth, it's beautiful. So the inside of the growth ring becomes the outside of the basket. So all of the white wood there is natural. It's done with the spring wood from the outside of our logs and the heartwood, which is brown, on the inside of the logs. So I tried to mix everything that we have to remember for future generations with this basket. And as I created it, I took pictures of every step. I walked into the woods, I took a picture of our woods, where we are today. I have a picture from last year of those same woods, so you can see the devastation in 1 year. And then I have documentation of what the squiggle marks, the gallery marks from the EAB, the larvae, the different stages of creating the basket, the pounding, recording the sound of the pounding. It resounds. I like to consider it the heartbeat of the black ash basket. So I have all of these steps, and I'm putting those together on a flash drive, which I just learned is like getting outdated. So it'll be on a hard drive too. But I'll have these things that document the whole process, what's happening to our black ash basketry cultural teachings, and what we can do in the future. This can hold these teachings and sustain these traditions for future generations. And so everything I create today, I try to think about tomorrow. When I'm gone, what can I leave behind for the people to continue to teach them, to help them, and just in case, it's not around. And I say just in case because at times we have these traditional teachings where we might only have 1 or 2 people left doing it. Luckily with black ash teachings, it's pretty strong in each community we have, but it does not mean strong with, many people. In my community, it's strong with about 5 or less. And so my daughter and I would be 2 of those people. And in the Army, they say 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So this year I'm going to focus a lot on mentoring people I've been watching over the years. Some of them know I've been watching them, some of them don't, but I have them down on a piece of paper. I'm going to go to them. I'm going to offer to mentor them because we're at a place where we need to make sure other people are coming in and teaching. And I've been watching them for years and they weren't ready yet. They had other things going on in their lives, and I've kind of asked them, could tell they weren't ready, but most of them are at a place where they can. So this basket is all about that, sustaining our traditions and the resilience that Native people have. They tried to take away our teachings in the boarding schools, the very teachings that I use today. They did not succeed. We still weave with it today. And this basket of resilience also has copper in it. I come from the Great Lakes. We have the purest copper in the world. Copper is a very healing material. And so it it goes with the whole theme of the basket because it's about healing, it's about continuing, and it's about making sure that everything we've had yesterday, we will have tomorrow. And so I invite you guys to see the basket up close when you're done, but also all of the other incredible work in the show.
I have a follow-up for that incredible response. Thank you, Kelly. And this is for Lilly Van. I know that something that we're thinking deeply about is intergenerational artistic practices, and your grandmother, Jane Austen, is one of our commission artists, as well as all of the artists in this panel, and has created 3 works in the show. Can you talk a little bit, Lilly, about your experience working and learning from your grandmother and some of the rich traditions that are passed down from matriarch to matriarch in your family regarding Cherokee pottery?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I began doing pottery when I was about 12 years old, but I have always been learning, basically, because my grandmother had been doing it since the 80s. So I was kind of born into it. But last year I started full time. Like, I dedicated everything to it and to honor her, because no one else in the family had picked up the tradition. So I did everything I could to learn that from her. And now I'm teaching it, actually. And she says the best way to learn, to keep learning, is to teach. So I've been trying to teach as much as I can. And it's a great honor because I'm doing it full time now, and she's probably taught about hundreds of people, and only a few stick to it. And I'm the ones that have stuck to it. So I'm very proud to have learned from her. And does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So one of the pots that is in the show is called Journey to Arkansas, which is not in this area, but is around the corner. Can you talk about that piece, why, especially here in Crystal Bridges, there's a connection to Cherokee history, to having that piece being a really important inclusion in the show?
Yeah, so on the Trail of Tears, we went from North Carolina to the northeastern part of Oklahoma, and we passed through Arkansas. So it's pretty much a dedication to that trip whenever we went along Arkansas. So it's not technically a Cherokee pot, it's just Cherokee influenced by the Arkansas pots. But it was to dedicate that time that we went through Arkansas and just to honor the area.
And then I can't remember the piece, the fire pot, the Firebird pot.
Oh, the fire pot?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one has a very long history. So they say that along the Trail of Tears, to keep embers for a fire, we marched during the winter, so it was very cold, and so they had to keep embers in a little pot to keep it going. But the fire pot over there is a very exaggerated size. The actual pot is maybe a hand pot. But it was to hold embers along the Trail of Tears, so throughout the whole journey, they'd have something to start the fire with. So we call it the fire pot, but it's a big deal in Cherokee Nation. And then at the end of the trail, we went to Tahlequah, Oklahoma, and at the Cherokee Capitol, there's a fire still burning. So there's one flame at the Cherokee Capitol now.
Thank you. And just to sort of build on this notion that I think tracks throughout many works in this show, this idea of what we carry and why, and how objects and artworks can carry stories that are much bigger than maybe folks might expect who don't have familiarity with the history. My next question is for Jeri Redcorn. We have a stunning pot in our collection now titled Chiatsi, which is the Caddo word for warrior. Can you talk a little bit about that work in particular, and maybe some of your process as a ceramicist in the other works that you're working on for this commission?
Yes. My piece is the small one in the back. It is a head pot that's called Chiatsi. And Chiatsi is man or warrior in the Caddo language. And and I want to talk about a little bit about intergenerational and how I came to be a Caddo potter. I'm primarily known as the person who is reviving Caddo pottery. For a while I was the only one, and yeah. And it was a lonely journey. I mean, it was a good journey, but it was a lonely journey because, in growing up, I didn't have people to teach me. We came from Louisiana and Arkansas, and one of the things is the pottery tradition didn't come with us. However, our songs and dances did. And, knowing that we were from a place of, had lush, tall vegetation and water and swamps. I know we now, the Caddo, like we were from Louisiana and Arkansas, but when we got to Oklahoma, it was a very sad time because we had been removed, forcibly to the plains. So when I grew up, it was, we were dancing the alligator dance. It's one of our traditional dances on the plains, and I wondered that, that all of the dances that we did were related to swamps or, forests, and yet it didn't make that connection. I kind of knew in the back of my mind, that we had been in a different place. But it wasn't until I was in my 50s that I actually found I found a connection to the pottery, and it opened up a history for me, because in looking at the design on that piece is from a pot. The shape of it and everything is from Arkansas. It was basically that look, but I incorporated the copper in it thanks to my daughter Maura, who made the earrings, the copper earrings, and Kelly and I were talking about the copper because, for instance, the gorget that I have on is a replica from Spiral Mounds. We are a mounds people, and in Arkansas and Louisiana, Texas, there were mounds, and all of them were Caddo. And so coming from an agriculture, a mounds, and then finding ourselves, on the plains was such an abrupt thing for our people. And yet when through all of their sacrifices, the families that finally were alive, to come to get to Oklahoma and our reservation there, I didn't hear anybody really talk about it. It was, I also grew up with like the Cheyenne Arapahoes. We lived on the Cheyenne Arapaho reservation for a time in Colony, Oklahoma, and very near, like Binger was 15 miles, Caddo headquarters, and Carnegie was about 15 miles. So a lot of the dances that I went to were Kiowa and had a lot of, friends. So it was like meeting a lot of different people. But, to get back to the clay part of my story, I knew nothing, and I wasn't actually an art major, didn't study art in college. I was very interested in math. I really, like that structure, and maybe that's why I so like this. I believe it is in Little Rock, Arkansas, at the historic Arkansas Museum. But there it's that same pot. It's a little bit smaller, but in that museum. I feel like I'm rambling on, but when I talk about my experiences, I was born in 1939, and so a lot of my experience came from like World War II. My dad was, gone, and also through the assimilation portion of the Native Americans in the 1950s, when it was the government's policy to finally eradicate the Indian problem, and just turn us whatever. And through the 60s, with the American Indian movement, I did do the marches and was, part of the takeover I was teaching at Riverside Indian School during the takeover, when the students rose up against the institution. Where is our voice? Why are we not being taught something about our people? So at any rate, then all the way, just gone through so many eight decades of things happening, and so I am so pleased that people are carrying on, see young people, and that's very encouraging to me to see. I mean, they don't remember some of the maybe the hardships that some of us had gone through, but they are so connected. And Jordan, I don't know whether I answered your question or not, but
you did. And I want to highlight something that is sort of, again, one of the themes in this show, which is futurism, but more deeply seeing ourselves as connected intergenerationally to one another through art, right? And that is something that each of the folks on this panel and the artists in this show really share, is that heritage. And what I love about your work, Jeri, is it's a reminder. You mentioned the mounds that are in this part of the country. It's a reminder of time and our connectivity to our ancestors through time. And when I look at your artwork, I often think about the folks who came before, the generations who came before, and how much their resilience, to the credit of Kelly, your intentions behind the basket, really paved a way for us to be here today, but also for the continuity of our artworks. And I think one of the unique aspects about this exhibition that Ashley and I talked a lot about is, really creating space for fluidity of time. So not thinking about, maybe curating in a way that's chronological, but thinking about ways to find dialogues across time, through time, intergenerational dialogues that Lilly Van, you and your grandmother constantly are unfolding through ceramics, where we can find a discourse in a gallery. So while we have a range of media and we have a range of different approaches to artistic production, the through line is that kinship. And so thank you so much for sharing that. And I guess to sort of take us forward into that sense of intention, artist intention, but also maybe, I'm hoping, Teri Greeves, you can talk a little bit about your works in the exhibition and maybe your perspectives on the process of the exhibition as you know it.
First off, thank you for asking me to be here. I would not have come out had it not been for you asking me to be here. And I knew that there was going to be some other people here that I wanted to be around. in this moment in our history. So a lot of what I do is memory stuff. So when I'm working, my process is that I have a question that runs like a pebble in my shoe, and I have to deal with that pebble in my shoe. Sometimes it's right away, but a lot of times that pebble's in my shoe for a year or better before I can start to conceptualize about how I'm going to deal with it. And so with that then comes a lot of not just thinking, but then I have to research, I have to read, I have to ask people, I have to go to people and start thinking about it in a serious way and how that's going to come out of me. So first off, I have to say that my work is not traditionally Kiowa women's work. Among our people, the women are the abstractionists. Our minds as women work in the abstract. The men are the history keepers. They illustrate reality, the history of time in a manner that we can understand. So in the work that I'm doing, I'm using a female form of expression, beadwork, but I'm using a male voice in that my work is representational. And I understand that I understand what I'm doing is not actually within the protocols of Kiowa womanhood, all right? So I know that in a lot of ways I kind of mess around with things, and that's actually, innovate, I guess is, okay, it's the correct term for that. But it, maybe part of it is my little ADH rabbit brain that's got me bored, so I'm like, okay, I've done that already, now I'm gonna go on to something else. What was the other part of your question besides process? Oh. Yeah, so intentionality is actually a huge part of my process, and not just of the work that I do, the beadwork that I do, but I also was a co-curator of a major exhibition, Hearts of Our People, which opened in I don't remember what year that was.
2018.
Thank you. Thank you. And that exhibit had to do with intentionality. The white lady who asked me to curate that, Jill Alberg-Yo, when she asked me that day if I would co-curate an exhibit of Native women's art, I immediately said yes. And that night I woke up bolt upright and realized what that I just say that yes to, because there had never been an exhibition of Native women's art done before. There had been of contemporary art, but nothing that was a survey that showed Native women's art as actually the foundation of what is in all the major collections. So when you walk through a collection of Native American art at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, you go into the Diker room, and you look at everything that those white people have donated to the Met. Woman, 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 there's a man. Woman, 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 there's a man. Woman, 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 there's a man. And there's only one female pronoun, at least when I went to go visit it, in that entire exhibition, explaining that actually what we understand as traditional Native American art is actually made by women. Women hold the knowledge and the ways of producing these things. So beadwork, quill work, textiles, ceramics, weaving, all women's work. That's all women's work. So we go to do this exhibition, we start working on this exhibition, we start looking through the files, we start looking at all the collection history and all that stuff. Guess what white men didn't pay attention to? Their own women. There was no way they were going to write anything about our women. So none of the stuff had any kind of acknowledgement that this was women's work, even though that work is the work that has been trotted out from the British Museum to Dubai to Hong Kong as Native America, as what is the definition of Native America in an aesthetic way, in a physical way, in the material world. It's also what's highly collected. I know that our Kiowa cradle boards, the old ones, go for $250,000, $250,000 these cradle boards go for. There's no acknowledgement of the fact that that's actually women's knowledge and wisdom that holds that. Now we know it in our own communities. So when white lady asked me to do this, yes, Jill, I'll do this. I said, well, there's no way that, first off, I can speak for you all. You all speak for yourselves. As a Kiowa person, I can't even speak for Kiowas. I'm nobody. I'm not even an elder. So how would I be that person to be here to speak for all Kiowa people? So I realized right away that we needed an advisory board because we needed Navajos talking about Navajos, Pueblos talking about Pueblos, Osage talking about Osage. And so that's what we did. We got together 21 women, mostly Native and mostly artists, because I wanted women that came from our communities that were the knowledge holders. They didn't have PhDs in art history, and that didn't matter to me, but it mattered to the administration that I was working with, because they didn't recognize that traditional knowledge as having any value. And as we were going forward, I realized that our value systems were like two ships passing in the night. The value system of the Indian world and the value system of the white world are so incredibly different that we almost weren't able to talk to one another in this exhibition. We were stymied over and over again over what was allowed and not allowed. Pop Chow Lee was eliminated by our director. Pop Chow Lee, in my mind, is one of the iconic women artists that broke ground as a Pueblo painter like me doing men's work, you know? So how do you eliminate something like that? Well, that's someone who has no knowledge of actually our value system and what we do. So in this, my intentions for this exhibit was to place women properly in American art, in the canon of American art. That was a hard pull. And so my thought came about actually with one of your baskets, Kelly, because you were talking about making berry baskets. And I thought, Kelly's like my sister, all right? She named my youngest boy. This is an unusual thing to be curated by a Native person. This doesn't happen, and it hasn't actually happened in my lifetime except for now. So the curation here is a little bit different because actually there's kin up here. And that's something in the white world you never acknowledge. Oh, I stand alone, I'm an individual, I'm an ego, I'm my own whatever. That's not how we function. How did you say? One?
Oh, two is one, one is none.
Right, two is one is none. Makes perfect sense in the Indian brain, in the Indian world. So I was thinking about your baskets, that berry basket, and I thought about that woman that made that berry basket, and she went out and got berries to feed her family with her berry basket. And then I thought of my husband's grandma, because she's also Ottawa, GTB, like her Grand Traverse Band from up north. And his grandma used to make them baskets for sale, and she would sell them in the pawn shops, right? Because that's the only place that would buy Indian art back then. And I thought about that woman, his grandma, making them baskets and feeding her family with them baskets, just like that lady made that berry basket to feed her family. And I thought about my mother's trading post. I grew up in a trading post where all those women came in and they sold their beadwork to feed their children, put diapers on their kids. And I thought, well, the intention hasn't changed. The function has, the process to get there has, but the intention never changed with those women making that work. The intention has always been to provide sustenance, to provide money, to provide identity. And that is what is encoded in our things. In our traditional objects, our identities are encoded into them. And even as contemporary artists, we are encoding that identity specific to us into those individual pieces. And so that's what my work's about.
So this panel is one of 3 artist-led panels that's connected to this exhibition opening. And the reason that we're really leading with artist-led dialogues and curating in a way that is vocality centered and oral history centered, as a curator of Indigenous art, passing the mic is not just an act of generosity, it's best ethics. And so as we think about, the stories that we tell, as I think about the stories that I curate, and the ways that I'm telling stories, having that sense of perspective is so key, because as you've heard, each artist has their own specific context, and I think something that we face in the museum world writ large, and in history, the gaps in the stories around American history is that Native America is a monolith. And we can see today that that's simply not the case. And I'm so grateful to these incredible artists, the artists in the show, who bring those stories from the home fire, from our communities to the fore, because it provides that moment of connection. I have a follow-up, and this is for Kelly Church. Something that you talk a lot about is a connection to land within all of your baskets and your weaving sort of textile practice and sculptural practice. Can you say more about land as kinship? Can you say more about your responsibilities to the land through your art?
Yeah, my responsibility as a black ash basket weaver to the land is to ensure the health of the forest for all of us when I go out there, because I am out there. When I go harvest a tree, I'm like a quarter mile, sometimes a mile into the woods. So I'm probably a person that might not see places that others do. And collecting seeds, though, our responsibility as all of us, we can all collect seeds. So in losing all of our trees, it does make you see the land in a whole different way. We have lost, in Michigan, we have the potential to lose 803 million ash trees on public lands only. We have lost probably 800 million of those now, and it shows. And so when you live through this and you see what's coming, it makes you see the whole world in a different way than when you already had that relationship. Before, we would go into the woods, we would bring seeds with us, we would harvest a tree, we would replant 10 or 20, always looking out for the future generations, because you harvest a tree at, 20 to 40 years old. In light of losing all of the trees and knowing that emerald ash borer eats the young and the old, then you have to rethink your whole way of everything, and then those seeds become the most important thing. And so today, that is what I look at, how do we plant as many trees as we're losing today? I alone can't do that, but I can tell you what the forest looks like. I can tell you that it needs some help, and I can tell you that every single person in this room can help. I get really excited when I get to do a panel just to share this message. If there's 50 people in this room, every year in the fall time, seeds are on the trees, like now, September, October. It's the pine cones. It's those little helicopters that fall from trees. That is when they're ready to replant. If everybody sees those on seeding trees, you can grab them from the ground and you can replant them. Let's say all of us each year replant one tree. Let's say we replant 10. We can help the future generations have the same trees that we have today. We not only rely on those for our baskets, we rely on the trees for our air, just oxygen alone. But today isn't what we need the forest for. We need them forever. So our future generations, we're taking care of our mother, we're taking care of our earth, that is in one. And so it is so important for all of us to do that. And I look at the health of the forest, and that's another thing that I'm doing this year besides mentoring. My husband and I are revisiting all of those ash stands. So 99% of those ash trees will be dying from the emerald ash borer. But what I want you guys to hear is 1% is living. We revisited an ash stand from 20 years ago, and there is a tree that has been thriving throughout that devastation. One tree is living. We found another tree in another ash stand. And so we're studying those trees. We're seeing what is about that. But there we hear again the word resilience. Those trees were resilient during all of the devastation. So in that way, that is how I'm helping care for the forest. And I'm looking for what's living, looking for what's dead, trying to educate people about seeds, and also trying to replant as many trees as we can in my lifetime that I will never see for the future generations. And so I encourage all of you to wake up every day and think about, next September, October, I'm going to replant some seeds. Every day you'll remind yourself, and then when it comes September, you're going to be excited to see those seeds. They start coming out in May, July, August, you'll see them growing on the trees, but it's when they turn brown and begin falling on their own that they're ready for you to replant. So I encourage all of us to take care of the health of the forest, and I'll always be there for you. If you guys have my email, you have a question, I will answer.
This is the importance of really creating space for exhibitions like American Sunrise. And all of the messages that you've heard today are about what the show is about. And I want to just pause for a moment and recognize the artists in the room who have contributed to this show, who have worked in this show, and who have worked alongside the show. So if you have been doing this work, please raise your hand. Round of applause. I want to thank you all again for coming to the panel today. The exhibition will be open through March. I hope you come back. I hope you bring your families and enjoy the rich and beautiful stories in American Sunrise. Thank you.